Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guests this time are Zosha Warpeha and Mariel Terán, who in fact pick 2 records apiece, 4 in total, on this podcast. Zosha is a composer, performer based in New York in the US. Mariel Terán is a contemporary composer based in La Paz in Bolivia. And they've released a collaborative record called Orb Weaver on the label Outside Time, in which Zosha is playing the hardanger d'amor, which is a sympathetic stringed instrument linked to the Norwegian hardanger fiddle. And Mariel is playing a variety of indigenous Andean flutes. This is a really incredible record. I know I can be quite hyperbolic, but this is honestly one of the best things I think I'm going to hear this year. I just love how both playful but also intense these improvised collaborations get. There's a few occasions where they sound like birds in this kind of playful skirmish, but at the same time, they always sound sympathetic to each other's textural emissions. It's like they're trying to find the optimal points of contact between their respective instruments. And sometimes there's this lovely sense of bouncing off each other. And other times they're kind of entwined like ivy wrapping itself around a plant. It's just a gorgeous thing. And I love the sense of space as well that shrouds this record. It feels like that they're both treating negative space as this kind of like third collaborative presence between them. I was really stoked to get them both on the podcast because I wanted to gush about this record, but also hear what records they picked. So we go in lots of lovely places. We reach back into their histories as composers and players throughout this conversation. And I had a lovely time. They were wonderful guests. So if you are enjoying the podcast, you can support it over at Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/crucial listening. You can donate monthly or one-off, any amount you please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, enough of that. This is Zosha Warpeha and Mariel Terán on Crucial Listening. Hello, Zosha. Hello, Mariel. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hi, Jack.
Hey,
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So you're here to talk about some important albums. You've both picked 2 records apiece. Before we get into those, I want to talk about your new record together, Orb Weaver, which has been released on Outside Time. So you first met each other in 2023, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We were both a part of the One Beat residency by Found Sound Nation. We were meeting in Florida at the Atlantic Center of the Arts, and it was like 1 month among a bunch of young musicians from all over the world. Really special time.
Wicked. In fact, I saw this conversation you had on Talkhouse recently where you recounted that first performance, which sounded amazing. Maybe I'll start with you, Zosha. What are your memories of that first performance that you both had together?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even as much of a performance, but just we were in a room And we were supposed to be rehearsing with another ensemble. And everyone went out and took a break and took a very long break. And we were just kind of there for the rest of the afternoon. And we just kind of looked at each other and were like, do you want to play? And we had never played just one-on-one before, just had been in the context of other musicians. And yeah, we just started making sounds together with our instruments. And it was, such a musical connection right away. And we played for probably a half hour without stopping, and really beautiful.
Awesome. Mariel, what are your memories of that first? Again, not performance, but just rehearsal.
Yeah, it was quite like, as Zosha said, like we were having a dramatic moment, a musician dramatic moment with our partners of the ensemble. And we just decided to play, and we're like, why not? I mean, we never played before, but I think that we already knew that Zosha and we loved improvising. So it was quite organic that we started playing. It was like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I remember that she connected me to her pedal, and I was just with a normal microphone because my instrument is a traditional one made of wood and stuff. And we started flowing, and it was just so natural, so amazing listening to her. Of course, I saw her playing before, also in this residency, and I was quite amazed by her instrument. I listened to it, but I never saw it live, so it was great to see her playing too. So it's quite special, and there's where we started.
And then it was a year later, right, 2024, that you convened to record Orb Weaver, although, as I understand, it wasn't like a formal, like, let's together and record an album. It just so happened you had mics and someone to help and just went for it.
Pretty much. It was just like, I have a day free. I have a space we can set up in. Let's just play and see what happens. And at the very least, we have a really nice document of this duo practice.
And what did you feel? I mean, I think, again, referring to that Talkhouse piece, sounded like that you were kind of feeling the differences in each other since you'd convened, like, initially, that you both changed in each other's eyes. So, I mean, what kind of, I don't know if you can articulate this, what felt different about that time when you met to record the album, say, versus like that first time that you got together?
I feel as though both of us were just a little more settled in sort of our artistic identities by that point. It's as though the residency in 2023, it was just sort of a first step in both of us going with our different ideas of like solo music and our compositional ideas and putting them out there. And so this burst of momentum that happened right after that residency, for me, I think I had recorded my first album a month after the residency and then released it a year later, around the time when Mariel was in town, actually. There was just so much growth. We were both collaborating with people. Mariel, you were super busy too. You were performing everywhere and premiering new works and going to the Mata Festival in New York. So I think there was just so much musical growth and more of a groundedness in each of our playing styles.
I mean, I totally agree with Zosha. Like, it felt like we were younger when we were at this residency. Like, we were also a bit maybe immature, and we weren't really aware of what we were going to do with our music. Like, this residency gave us like the courage to put our music out there, and I felt that way. And a year after that, I was in New York. I didn't know I was going to be in New York a year after the residency. And we just met. I was so happy to see her again because I felt like it was impossible to see her again. And it happened. And I was in New York for the Mata Festival, premiering a piece that in the first place I thought was not going to be selected. And it was selected. I was playing with the Brooklyn Orchestra, so it was certainly an important moment, I guess, in our lives. Because I also listened to Zosha in Civil Dawn, and her album is so different from the Zosha that I saw a year after, and it was just like, oh my God, Zosha is more mature, like more settled, like she said. Yeah, and it felt that way. I think that all the sounds also we didn't really needed to talk that much, because it was just like we trusted what we were going to play. After that year, we were like confident in how we were going to connect, how we were going to talk with our instruments and stuff.
Well, I get the impression that you're both kind of reflecting quite consistently on your relationship with your instruments, your respective instruments. And there seems to be so much at play with your particular instruments because of their connection with tradition. But also I know that you both have quite interesting relationships with that. And I've heard you use like a phrase like finding out what the instrument wants to say. There's this that lovely idea that the instrument has kind of an agency beyond like just what you want to funnel through it. I think is just so lovely. I wondered where your relationship was like with your respective instruments like now. Are there any specific kind of challenges or considerations or contemplations you're having in relation to your instrument that's kind of guiding you forward at the moment?
That's a good question.
Deep one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the moment, like, I'm really just marveling at how much I feel like I am continuing to discover on a daily basis, and really just sitting in that challenge of like, how am I going to push into the next space? Because I know it's there and I know it's ready to reveal itself to me. And I think one of my personal challenges at the moment, and one of the nice things about a year ago when we recorded, and we've been talking about this a little bit, of how my playing was starting to depart a little bit more from the like Nordic sounding playing a little bit that is really prominent on Silver Dawn a year before that. And so I think now, you know, looping back, adding an additional year, I have departed even more from that. And I really am trying to find like, what is the balance that I want in my playing? And it's looking for that voice of the instrument, and maybe the voice also is living in that world, and I want to pay respect to that and give it the space that it needs. But yeah, it's always just finding the balance and finding how far I want to go in either direction. Not that it's a binary, like an either or. It's just, I don't know if that makes sense.
100%. That's but, gorgeous. Yeah. I love that. Thank you, Zosha. Mariel, what about you?
I think it's a little bit like Zosha. Like I'm always afraid of forgetting how the instruments sounds traditionally, and I keep on studying that. I'm part of the experimental traditional instruments here in my country, and that is called the OAIN, and we keep on studying the instruments, playing them in contemporary music, but also playing them in the context, and also studying where they come from and the traditional melodies and stuff. And I think that's really important for me. I think that a year ago I was more into improvisation and composition, because I'm also a composer and I keep studying and stuff, but I was kind of forgetting that side. And I decided that I don't really want to forget, because it's part of the instrument and a really important part. And that part also influences the music that I make. So I decided that I want to keep that balance, like study the traditional music, maybe even go deeper, like trying to understand the culture in a better way, and maybe study that, but maybe not that deep. And I want to dig deeper, really, that way. And also I want to take the instruments to a farther place, you know, like going with the instrument. I used to say that these instruments chose me, like they were people or something. And I wanted to go back there, because I said, okay, they are like, they are instruments and you are supposed to use it like like any human instrument, right? But these instruments are actually very important, since in my country, in the Aymara tradition, music is not even a word. So coming from there, you can see music in a different way. Like, they don't see it as music, but they see it as a language. They see it as part of their souls. It's so deep that you cannot actually forget that part of the instruments. Yeah. So yeah, I decided to actually be balanced and very aware of the instruments that I'm playing, and respect them, respect their culture, and of course know about them, because it would be embarrassing not to know where they come from and just play them like any kind of flutes, right? So yeah, that's at least what I'm trying to do now.
Amazing. That was great. Thank you both. The record is just ridiculous, the one you've done together. It's so good. I've had a wonderful time with it.
Thank you.
The second track, I think it's the title track, isn't it? Goodness, great. I just can't. I'm just okay. I could gush, but everyone please go check it out. It's just wicked. I'll put a link in the show notes. But yeah, let's talk about your important record. So one question I like to ask at this point is how you thought about the word important when picking your list. So Zosha, let's start with you. Was there a way that you thought about the word important when picking the records that you did?
Yeah, I ended up thinking about the records that felt like pivotal points in not even development, but points at which I realized that, for example, that the Hardanger fiddle existed, and I realized like what I had been looking for at these different points. So we'll get more into them, but it just was pivot points in my own awareness, really, because there have been so many important albums, but you know we have needs for different albums at different times and moods and eras of the life, but I think what I chose ended up being things that just pointed me in certain directions and really, had an impact on who I am now today.
For me, it led to the thing that I was talking to you about before, like how instruments are treated, like how they are recorded, how composers write for them, and I think that was the most important thing for me at the time of picking these albums, like how these musicians actually make the instruments look, sound, and I think that the whole context where they are using them also is important, and what they want to say with them too. So, and as a composer and also as a player, I think that both albums felt very important for me in the last year.
Okay, great. Well, let's take the albums one at a time then. So, Zosha, let's start with one of yours. Which one do you want to go for first?
Well, talking about pivot points, I'll start with the first I sent you, which is that Neve by Georg Buljo and Nils Öklund. And this is a duo record. It's with Hardanger fiddle, played by Nils Öklund, he's one of my favorite Hardanger fiddlers out there. And he was really the first contemporary Hardanger fiddler I ever heard. The vocalist on the album is, and I hope I'm saying his name right, I don't actually know, but Georg, he's actually a Sami vocalist that grew up in the joik tradition in northern Norway. Norway and all of the Nordic countries, there's that region in the north traditionally inhabited by the Sami. And I was at a friend's place and we were just sharing music back and forth. And he was like, I've heard you play a little bit. I think that you would really enjoy this musician here. And he put on the first track from that record. And I was in college. I was like 21, 22 maybe, and everything just shifted in that moment for me. Like hearing the tone of the Hardanger fiddle on the record and kind of the rawness of the sound, and it was tactile, it was guttural, it was like so vocal also. I just had this complete shift in who I thought I could be as a string player. And at the time, I was really searching for string players I connected with. I was studying jazz. I was not very happy studying jazz either. And I thought that, I had so many insecurities. Like, I couldn't play fast. I didn't really understand jazz harmony in the way that I thought I should. And then I heard this album that is really all of the yoik. They're these very small melodies that are just sort of cycled over and over again. And 4-bar phrases, if we want to put it that way. And there's so much within that phrase and that sort of mantra that gets cycled in this way. So yeah, that was a really big shift for me.
So you had this record, and then this big shift happens for you. How did that happen? Because I guess there's a moment you hear it and you're like, cool, okay, this is something. Was it quite immediate for you? Were you like, I know what I'm going to do? Like, I know the pivot I need to make? Or was there a period of, I don't know, testing, trialing? What did it look like?
I guess it was sort of the one thing leads to another, right? Like, I was listening to this album, and then I started going down the rabbit hole with everything Nils has ever made, and just like listening to all these records. I was debating which record to send you, because this one in particular, maybe it's not actually the most influential on my actual playing style. So again, it's just sort of that pivot point. There were some other solo records, like Briss is a big one for me by Nils, 2004. That was the one I was considering sending to you. But I kind of opened all these doors through hearing this first record. Went down the rabbit hole, and over the course of probably a year or so, I think I started playing in this way that was sort of soaking up some embellishments and some phrasings, and I hadn't played a hardanger fiddle yet. But then I was taking a lesson from this violinist, Sarah Caswell, who lives in New York, and she actually has now the instrument that I mainly play on, a hardanger d'amore. And I was telling her about this record I was listening to, and she's like, oh, I have one of those fiddles. Do you want to try it? And she tunes it up and hands it to me, and suddenly everything I was trying to do on violin worked.
Oh my God,
oh,
wow.
Like, I know how to play this instrument now, which isn't quite true. Like, I learned how to play the instrument after, over the next several years. But it was a shift where, and, you're in a certain headspace in college too. That's, for me, there was a lot of insecurity and a lot of like, I don't think I'm a good musician. Like, I don't think I'm a good violinist. There were a lot of things that were telling me that at the time too. And to pick up an instrument that you feel like you can actually tell a story through, and it's actually like what's inside being released like that, that is a really, really powerful moment. So yeah.
Amazing.
That's the arc.
Wow. Okay, that's so cool. One thing I wanted to ask about with this record actually is just, I'm so struck at how the hardanger is produced, or like how the sound is rendered on this record, because there's not much. This is maybe a generalization, and I listened to the record like obviously just a couple of times, but there's not much focus on like the body or the resonance of the instrument itself. It seems to be more how the instrument resonates in its space, and there's a lot of like emphasis on the top, and it has this weird sort of airy hollowness where it kind of feels almost levitational. Do you have conceptions of like how, like explicit ones as to how you want your instrument to sound when it's produced, and is there any connection with how it's like presented on this record?
Whoa, that is a great question. Yeah, so on that record, I'm trying to think of the mix itself. It does have like so much of this bow noise in it, right? Like without a ton of stuff underneath, and it's almost relying on the production of the rest of the album. And like there's a lot of production on the voice itself too. And I think that's coming from Georg. It is a producer, and I think that he kind of, massaged all of this sound into one world. And I think that the sound of the fiddle in that record is not necessarily how I wish my sound to be produced. I do really like the high end and the bow sounds, and sort of that brittleness. I think that that's one of the things that really drew me in with that record and with that mix. But at the same time, I think there's a softness that I look for in my sound. It's like this combination of the brittle and the air and also velvet. Like there's this other layer that I really want to be part of it. And I don't want any of those elements without the others. It's a package deal, and you need to have the support and all of the things for me personally. But yeah.
Cool. Do you have a favorite track on this record?
Yeah, well, I mean, I really do love the opening track. And again, like thinking about pivot moments, Madras was probably my favorite out of all of them. And it's this just really, really gentle yoik that's kind of cycling. I just love, it's gentle. It's kind of bright as well. Like it's a bit of a happier, like a calm little lullaby feeling. And there's just this aspect of the voice also that it's very vulnerable, I think. And yeah, that's probably those are my two favorites, the opening track, as well as Madras. And I'll add also just in this, now I haven't studied anything about Sami music or yoik tradition, but this was one of the early records that I started thinking about wordless vocals with. And there are a few different artists now that have kind of led me to discovering how I could do that with my own voice and with combining voice and fiddle. But this one was also a big one for that, of hearing wordless vocals mixed together with unison bowed strings. And that ended up being a huge part of it still is a huge part of my practice, but after starting to listen to this record, I started thinking about how I could combine those things. And yeah.
Thank you. I was going to ask that question and spaced on it, so you did. You did my job. Nice one.
Good.
Mariel, have you heard this album at all? If you haven't, absolutely fine. I just like to check whether there's anything you wanted to say first.
I didn't listen to it the complete album, but I think I listened to the track that Zosha was talking about. Oh, it's pretty amazing, and it's quite like what she says, that it's like she took like what she really liked from those techniques and maybe reinterpreted it. I think that's what I felt from Zosha, Gus.
Okay, well, Mariel, let's go for your first important record. Which one would you like to go for first?
I think that I will go with Gaia Sariaho's one, the album that I chose. This one that has Notes on Light, Orion and Mirage. I mean, what I wanted to tell you about this album, it's like it was really hard to choose at first because I didn't know which album of Gaia Sariaho I would actually send. But I think this album might be important for the composer herself, the orchestra as well, and the director of the orchestra. But I will also say that Kaya Sariahu for me is like maybe the biggest influence as a composer that I have, and also as a player. So that's why I had a conflict there. I didn't know which one to send you, but I think that this one summarizes a lot what she is.
How did you come into her work? Do you remember?
Yes. Well, in 2018, I started studying composition, and most of my teachers used to suggest Kaya Sariahu. And there was this moment that UL Ensemble came to my city, and they are a duo from Colombia, and they performed L'agonisme de Lille, and I knew the piece, but I never listened to it live, and it was so amazing, like a life-changing moment, that I decided to actually study this course in a better way. And the teacher that plays in this duo, Daniel Leguizamon, he told me that like it was like Kaya Sariahu knows how to write for any kind of instrument, and you feel that she's not only teaching how to write for an instrument, but also she's learning the player how to play her instrument. So it was really interesting, and I started studying her scores, and it's like, oh my god, she's like taking the instrument to another level. And I think that she makes the same thing in this album. Like I love Orion in the first place, so it was like, oh yeah, this album, I can send this album, because she really takes writing scores to another level, and also using materials, using electronics, using the instruments for their characteristics, like really using those characteristics to make the piece something else. And yeah, I think that, yeah.
Orion is a headspin. Jesus Christ. I listened to it, was it today or yesterday? There's that big build. I hope I'm thinking of the right piece. It's like the second on this is the second piece, right, on this particular selection. But for that first like 5-6 minutes, just this building giddiness that I think for me, I was like, well, maybe it will kind of come into this like emphatic alignment, but it's just like loud, disorientating. It's a really like heady, intense feeling. It's quite amazing. You mentioned that she's had an impression on you as a composer, and you just relayed some really lovely things about how she interacts with the instruments that she's writing for, and it seems to have this real intimacy. So how did you pull what she's doing and her influence like into what you do? What does that look like within your composition practice?
Well, I mean, as a composition student, of course, it was like writing for cello or for violin, and I had to study how to write for this instrument. But when I got to Andean wind instruments, it was like, you don't have theory to write for this instrument. They are not actually perfectly tuned. So how do you write nicely for this instrument, right? So I just started first studying these extended techniques that she uses in almost all the instruments, and then taking these extended techniques to the Andean wind instruments. And of course, it was not the first time. And there's also a composer here in Bolivia, Sergio Prudencio, that actually made and wrote many pieces for Andean wind instruments. And he was like the strongest influence that I had, and the reference that I had. And then you have Kaya Sariahu, who has a very classical way of writing. And you can take many of those techniques to writing techniques and also playing techniques to these instruments, and the results are quite amazing. Like, you don't have to hand the instrument in some way that you are taught to. You can just move it around, or I don't know, maybe amplify it, or maybe use electronics for this instrument, but not electronics that go above the instrument, but electronics that make it look better and to make it brighter. And that's a detail that I saw in Zosha too. Like, when she was playing somehow, and in this installation, they had an installation that they turned this room in like a cave, and she was playing with her pedal. I remember that thing. Like, it's like you use electronics, you use digital sounds, analog sounds, but in a way that your instrument is actually increasing their characteristics instead of backing off, or I don't know, decreasing what it's meaning. And I think that's what I learned from Kaya, and also to respect the instrument that you're writing for, and respect the instrument that you are playing. So I started like studying the instruments, like in all the varieties that maybe they have, maybe other sounds that they carried. And maybe you just see a flute and it's like, oh yeah, you have to move your fingers and you have to move your mouth in some way. And it's like they have many things in common with the classical flute. So maybe you can find some other textures and sounds with these techniques as well. So it's just like a mix with what she does.
Okay, so when you were talking just then, I was like thinking about composition in that way. And I may reveal myself as someone who has no experience in this, so this is a naive question. But on one hand, it sounds like that makes things so much easier, because you are broadening, I guess, the ways in which you're thinking about the instruments you're dealing with. But then when you're also dealing with, say, like more extended techniques, or maybe thinking about instruments outside of like this very specific kind of maybe traditional classical paradigm, I guess there's less precedent to be working with. Maybe the players you're working with are like less used to interacting with their instruments like that. Do you think it makes it kind of like easier for you to compose when considering instruments like that, or is it harder but just feels right? Does that make any sense whatsoever? If not, that's fine. It's quite jumbled.
Of course. No, it's all right. I think I'm very lucky for the context where I live in. Like, I got the chance to work with classical musicians, and well, in Bolivia they are not really related with contemporary music. Like, they like it, but they prefer not to play it. Like, it's like, okay, I wouldn't like to use scordatura, for example, like my instrument, you know. But when it comes to any one instrument, there's a nice circle here of people who love contemporary music and experimental music. And when I got to write for them, for example, this orchestra, the experimental Indian Instruments Orchestra from Bolivia, they are really used to that because of their training. They were always playing traditional music and also contemporary music. So they are used to, to take a flute, a pífano, in another way, that they don't have to use it this way. They can use it vertically, or they just have to, make some sounds with the surface or something, and they are open to that. So I think that's lucky that that we have this kind of musicians that can also teach you, not only receive the scores and start reading. They just and they also give you feedback, so it's great. And I was also very surprised. When I was at the Mata Festival. These musicians, of course, did not have a close relationship with the Andean instruments, but they were very respectful, and they started, discovering what they were made of and how they sounded and everything, and they got the whole idea. They were used. These the Brooklyn Orchestra, I think they are used to contemporary music. So it was very easy to work with them too. Like they were, oh, okay, you don't want anything melodic, you want textures. Great, we can do it. And it's so easy to work with musicians that are used to that. But of course, it's less easy when the musicians are from a very classical background. They have a very classical background. They are not open to do all the things. But it's also great to convince them to do crazy things. Maybe play. Yeah, it's like maybe you can, I don't know, you can make some noises in the surface, and I don't know, or maybe they were never asked to do different stuff with their instruments, and they're like, okay, can that be done or something like that, and it's great. You can discover many things of their instruments with them too. And I think that the experimentalist scene in my city, in La Paz, is getting bigger, and also in Bolivia. So those are great news, because you have more and more musicians that are willing to collaborate, willing to improvise, willing to read crazy scores, and I don't know, deal with electronics and not be, I don't know, scared of doing different stuff. And for me as a musician, it's also great because I can do different stuff with people and also be less scared, because I had those things too, like the prejudice over, I don't want to do that to my instrument, or I don't want to try this. And I got to change that, because I think I didn't mention this, but for a while I was studying violin, but it was classical violin. So you have some things in your mind that you are not allowed to do, but then you discover there's a whole world out there and of sounds that you are not discovering, not playing. So it's quite life-changing when you get to try more things with your instrument.
Beautiful. That's amazing. Zosha, have you heard, again, totally fine if you hadn't, have you heard this selection of pieces, or any work by this composer? Cool. Okay.
I have not, actually. I've been meaning to check out her work, because Mariel has talked about it, but I have not gone down that path yet of listening, and I'm really looking forward to checking it out.
Zosha, let's go for your second important album. So
yeah. So still in the Hardanger fiddle world, the second album I chose was Draumsinn by Anna Hitte. And Anna, I actually had the great fortune to study with her when I was living in Oslo for a couple of years. But I didn't know her music. I discovered by accident, by being just kind of paired with her through my mentor at the school I was at. And in this time, I had been listening to Nils Oakland. I had been listening to Benedicta Marseth, like two very well-respected, renowned Hardanger fiddlers. And no one had pointed me towards Anna. So anyways, I get this email that I'm supposed to study with this person, and my advisor, Uni, is like, oh, you'll really like her, you'll get along. And I'm like, oh, I don't know you, and I don't know if you know me, and like, we'll see. But then I'm doing some research, and I start listening to this work by her, and I'm like, holy crap, like this is what I've been looking for. This is the fiddler that it actually feels like that's where I'm headed. That's what I want as a composer and as a solo player. So this album is a collection of original compositions by Anna. Anna comes from Telemark, and she has been raised in the tradition, in the Telemark Hardanger fiddle tradition, is a beautiful player, very deep in that knowledge and in that lineage of playing. But she's also a bit of a weirdo and loves improvisation, loves contemporary composition, loves sound. So when she put out this album, it was trying to both compose new music that was in the time signatures of the Telemark tradition, but also kind of get more into these free-flowing textural spaces and very like small motivic spaces. And there was something just so beautiful about it to me, and the tuning she was exploring, and also just the sparseness of the record. I think these solo fiddle records that I had been coming across, this wasn't the only one, but yeah, to realize that a fiddle can carry its own, or carry itself on its own in that space, and that the space and the silence itself was such a big player in a recording, was really inspiring to me. So I came across this album, of course, when I was studying, when I was starting my master's, just moving to Norway, so 2019. And at that point, I hadn't quite developed my solo practice, which now lives in this more freely improvised space, but is a very, also, it's sort of a method of compositional development in a moment that really deals with motivic development and repetition. And so Anna's album was one of the first things that I had listened to that kind of dove into that idea of like deconstruction, of like taking a tiny motif and pulling it apart and like zooming in on it, repeating in this way in these little cells, which inherently is actually very connected to the Norwegian fiddle tradition and in the way that form works in different regions of Norway, especially regions like Telemark and Setesdal. There's a lot of these very small ideas that you cycle, and you change one thing and cycle that, and then you change another thing and pivot into another idea and begin that process again. So yeah, that's it.
And what was it actually like studying with her and working with her? Like, what was she like as a teacher?
Oh, it was incredible. I studied with a few different teachers. Anna was the wild card teacher that I got a handful of lessons with per semester. Wasn't my weekly lesson, but it was really lovely because she was just so encouraging of, like, she would teach me traditional tunes face-to-face in the traditional way. She knew that I was really interested in different tunings. So she would show me tunes using these different traditional tunings and just play a phrase to me. I would play it back to her. We'd kind of go back and forth until the entire song was constructed and play it together. But then we became pretty good friends. We would just talk about the tradition and talk about our place sort of my place is more on the periphery. Like, I wasn't raised in the tradition, and her place was raised in the tradition, but also trying to step outside. So talking about, how we relate to that and how we wish to express ourselves through that instrument. So yeah, she was one of the most inspiring people I came across during the time I was living there. And still her music, like, I perhaps don't listen to the first album we talked about. I don't listen to it very much anymore. I think my aesthetic tastes are in a different direction these days. But this album by Anna is one I am always returning to. I'm always putting that on again because it's just so inspiring every time I listen to it. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite track on it?
Yeah, I mean, I like so many of them, but one that I just want to dance to is that Undrestille, number 1. I think it's the second track on the album, and this is a piece that she does in the Gorlaus tuning, which is a tuning that I really enjoy playing with, and several of the tracks on my first album were in that tuning. But basically, it's similar to violin tuning, except the lowest string is detuned a step. So you have an F-D-A-E tuning, or that relative tuning in whatever key you're in. And this one, she builds a tune in the telespringar rhythm. And I'm also an avid dancer of the Nordic folk traditions. And so whenever I hear it, it's just like, it's trance-like. And I just want to, be out there on the dance floor. But it's like, it's slow too. It's not quite dance tempo. And so I feel my body just kind of going into this, I don't know, this rhythm when I listen to it. It's
nice.
Beautiful.
In fact, I wanted to ask about that bit, because it's funny, when you look up like Hardanger pieces on YouTube, so much of what you get back is like bump, and it's like really sprightly music. And don't take this like the wrong way, but the players are like smiling at each other, and there's this like real sort of social thing going on. And it's funny because my exposure to this instrument has been, say, through your music and these records that you put in my direction. And there is like so much space. And obviously there's, as you said, it feels like there's so much movement, but it feels either of a different type, or maybe like a sort of the solo version of that, where there isn't necessarily someone there to dance with, So it's like, it's got different energy. Like tell me a bit about that. Like, is that style of playing like on the same spectrum as, say, like the kind of solo music that you're interested in, or are there like two different strands kind of traditionally, or what's the deal there?
Yeah, so actually there are two different strands, and many different strands actually, but one big thing is this distinction between. So there are two terms that we use a lot in Norwegian folk music. One is gammeldans, and the other is bygdedans. And so gammeldans translates to old dance, which is counterintuitive because it is actually the newer tradition of the two. But gammeldans is your polkas, your Rhinelanders, your waltzes. It's the music and dance that translates across all of Scandinavia, actually. Like, you go into any gammeldans, and you should be able to dance the dances. If you're from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, you know all of the dances. And they're pretty like straightforward time signatures, and formally they're straightforward as well. There is an A section, a B section, and pretty simple to follow along. This is also, as far as my understanding goes, this is the tradition in Norway that you have groups playing it. Otherwise, Hardanger fiddle is a solo tradition. Like, it is straight up, you're not going to be playing those tunes with another person. And part of that is just like, I think, tuning two fiddles together. But the other part is that these forms are really an expression of the fiddler, where these variations and ways of returning to different phrases and different motifs, that is at the sole discretion of the person performing it. And so when you get good at like Googling the Hardanger fiddles, if you're trying to like, find a certain type of tune, with the right keywords, you'll actually come up with all the YouTube results that are a single fiddler and then a bunch of dancers that are going around. And it's very often just like one instrumentalist that is going to be accompanying the entire dance. And so that gets into the bygdedans territory, which is the village dance. And bygdedans is different in every region of Norway because geographically you have so much separation between all of these different valleys. And you see that the music evolved so differently from like one valley to the next, a lot because of the geography, and like people weren't moving around that much while this music was being developed. But then you would hear the cross-pollination happen, like, these two fiddlers from either sides of the country would meet at a market where they were craftspeople and selling their wares, and they would exchange tunes, take the tunes back, and then you suddenly have like a Vestland tune in the Valdres time signature that's now taken and morphed into a different thing. Okay, I have a point, I promise. In the big dance tradition now, we have all these different regions, different time signatures, different lineages of like masters and students. And you have dance music, but then you also have listening music. And there is an actual term for it, like Leerslåtter is a listening tune. And this has always been meant to be like, there is no dancing, there is no time. Like, this is a reflection of the natural world. There's going to be space. There's a story there. It's also where the fiddler can show off a little if they want, like with the embellishments, but the simplicity is also valued. And this was a type of tune that I was actually really drawn towards right at the beginning of my studies because of this idea that it's a rubato tune, and it's like free playing at its finest without any time signature, without any rhythm, and this very impressionistic tone painting approach to music. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was, and all the rest
lecture,
besides.
sorry.
That was freaking great. That's absolutely precisely why I asked that question. I was so interested. That's amazing. Wicked. Mariel, have you heard this record?
No, I didn't, and now I'm very curious. But I didn't know that she was your teacher, Zosha. I didn't know. It's great. It's amazing.
I mean, I got just so lucky.
That's great.
But I do highly recommend that album. I mean, I was listening back to it this weekend just to be like, did I make the right choice? And I was like, hell yeah. Like, I could hear like so much of what I do right now, I could hear in that album, of just like the tiny little developments here and there, ways that she'll just like repeat an idea and then change one thing. And that, I think hearing that record really gave me permission to do that in my own work and just embrace it.
Well, Mariel, we have one more important record. If you wouldn't mind giving me the name of it and then also a bit about why it's important to you as well, that would be fab.
Well, it's Dyer's Hands by Pedestrian Deposit. And, well, this instrument is quite important because of how it shows textures. And, well, I was studying, like, dual relationships in music, and I got to Pedestrian Deposit, and I think that they have a really amazing relationship with sound, since they are string instruments and electronics. And yeah, it got me thinking a lot about how I see noise, how I see electronics, how I relate to strings too. And this happened after I recorded with Zosha. So it was just like digging deeper into the relationship with the strings and my relationship with the strings, and also the strings with Zosha, you know? So yeah, I think that's mostly why this album is so important.
I wonder if it's possible to articulate what it is about, say, the relationship between the electronics and the strings, and say like noise and the strings as well, which on this record changed something for you or brought you to think about those elements differently.
When I started knowing about noise, it tells you what it is for the word, right? You know that you are going to listen to something very reckless, loud, and you will not really understand what you're listening to. But it's not exactly that way with Pedestrian Deposit. I know that there are many other bands and maybe duos that use noise in a different way. But I really loved how they use it, because it's like, I was telling you about Kaya Sariajo, that she uses reverb, for example, to make the instrument brighter, to make it look better. But it's the same with Pedestrian Deposit, but with noise. And I understand that they have self-made string instruments, and they use many standard techniques, and they also use melodies. But electronics, and especially the noise, it's always part of the melody. And especially in this album, like, it's not above the cello, above the strings, or making something reckless, but it makes it look better, tells a story. It's used like a real material and not just noise itself, it's part of the composition. And I think I could relate that with what we created with Zosha, because I always understood the strengths, like a melodic instrument, that it will always do melodies. But when I met Zosha and we started improvising, it's like she uses also noisy sounds to make her instrument look amazing. And I use some melodies, because my instruments are usually played in groups, in large groups. So you don't have these solo moments where you can, I don't know, go with the melodies that you created or something. You just have something to play. And with Zosha, was like, we were not like the melodic and the accompaniment instrument. It was just like, she could do the noise and I could go along with that noise, or maybe we can both do the melodies, or maybe combine melodies. And it was quite amazing. Like, I could relate Pedestrian Deposit with our work that way.
That second track on this album is just ridiculous. I think also as well, hearing you talk about it, Mariel, has kind of given it, I think, an extra sheen, because it feels like a lot of the really beautiful moments on this record partly feel that way because you know that they could get ugly very quickly. Like, things could just unravel and things could go really horrid. But they hold it, like, for that second track, they hold it there, just in that melody for, like, the whole thing. It's just the most gorgeous thing. Do you have a favorite track on the album?
It's that one. What Can't Be Given. That's nice. Exactly the track. Yeah, that was the track. Yeah. And I think the whole album has loads of melodies and beautiful string moments. But What Can't Be Given is actually, it's the most amazing track they have in that album, at least. Yeah, it was Pedestrian Deposit, and they are really noisy. And then you get to this track, it's like, oh, okay. They are not actually holding them back, maybe. I wouldn't say that, but it's like they are showing a romantic side of what they do, and it's very beautiful.
Have you seen them live at all?
No, of course not. I could not, but I would love to. I know that they are on tour right now. I will love to see them. Like here in my country, we are trying to develop something. I have some friends that build analog synths, and we decided to try something like that. And I connect my violin to their analog synths, and it was like, oh my god, we're kind of doing what Pedestrian Deposit does.
Wow!
And it's great. It's great. Yeah.
Is it
cool.
As intense as well? Like, is it kind of noise based too?
Yes, but we had kind of a concert just yet for the release of Or We Were here in La Paz. They were kind of the antagonic piece of the concert, because we had a listening session of Or We Were, and at the end we had this noisy stuff. And we were just saying, what if we just wake people up with something really noisy? And then we decided not to do that. We said like, okay, noise that does not have to be loud. Where does it say that it has to be loud? We can just not be as loud as people expect noise to be. And they can actually understand all the textures that we are using and relate that to our Weaver as well. Because our Weaver has loads of textures. So it's just like going with the same thing, you know, like having your ear listen to all the details that the music has. So if you get it too loud, you just, I don't know, you just get a mass of sound instead of listening to the details. And noise has details, of course. And we decided to not to do it too loud and let people wake up in a gentle way instead of just having a loud thing there. And it was very beautiful and they loved it. Like the change was okay. And it was like waking up to something different. Because after this, the 6 tracks of or Weaver, they were like, they were under, I don't know, kind of a spell. And especially this track, Que Sinto and Manto, that Zosha makes some amazing vocals like a siren. So they were like flying and it was great.
Oh, that's so lovely. It would have been a lot, wouldn't it, after that to be like straight at their eyes. Wow. I mean, that's such a good point, I think, is like, obviously it seems synonymous that noise music is like you play it at volume, and if you're in a room listening to someone live, you don't get much of a choice in that, and that visceral quality is awesome. But yeah, you do lose the ability to hear it when you turn it all into an endurance contest and like, oh wow, this is intense. You can't have that cerebral relationship with it. I should say, Mariel, this is very, very strange. So today I also recorded an episode of this podcast with my bandmate, and she wanted us to both pick 2 albums within noise and drone. She picked Dyer's Hands by Pedestrian Deposit. So twice in a day I've like spoken about this record. It's been so interesting to get both of your perspectives on it. How crazy is that?
Great. Yeah, it is. I don't know if actually Pedestrian Deposit, you saw them live or not?
I haven't, and in fact I wasn't aware of this record before both yourself and my friend Lucia like suggested it, and I was like, I need to check this band out more. But their videos are crazy. Some of the instruments that I think specifically Shannon is making with like tree branches or just crazy structures that she's climbing and got her legs suspended in, and it's wow. It's a lot. It's great.
Yeah, and I think it would be great to see it in performance, but I think they're loud, right? Like they love the loud kind of performance.
Yeah, it looks that way.
Yeah, I think it's experience, definitely a great experience, I'm sure. But yeah, maybe I will be able to see them live sometime.
Well, I think that's pretty much everything. I just have one little question at the end that I like to ask. I know I've already asked you to pick like 2 records each, and if nothing comes to mind here, absolutely fine. I just wanted to ask you both for maybe something more recently that has been taking your fancy. Is there something at the moment that you're playing a lot which you'd like to mention here? Zosha, I'll start with you.
Ooh, more recent. Let's see. I was playing for a while. I think I just had it I had it saved on my phone for an international flight, so I went through it quite a few times. But there's this collaboration, Weston Olenki and Cleek Schrey. And I need to look up the exact title, but it's this beautiful drone album that I think is 2 harmoniums, The Southern Harmony and Musical Companion.
Huh.
And they put it out last year, and it's just this, a wonderful collection of drone pieces that are also, reaching into some folk music roots territory, but it's all much more like extended and spacious and dealing with beautiful intonation. So I was really enjoying that, and I think I've been really feeling the pull towards working with a little bit more drone and intonation based things for myself. So
Wicked. Okay, awesome. I'll have to check that out. Mariel, what about you?
Well, there's this record that my colleagues from the orchestra, from this Andean Instruments experimental orchestra I told you about, they produced an album last year from a community that is from Cochabamba. That's another city in Bolivia, and they recorded the actual players from the community, and we are studying those melodies, and we have to memorize them and study them in detail. So I was kind of trying to memorize everything, and I was just listening to that album repeatedly. And I don't think it's on the internet. It's not yet, but it's a beautiful album. I think that they're planning to get it on Spotify. And yes, mostly traditional music, and it's war music that we have been studying. Like, they have these encounters from communities. They don't actually fight, but it's mostly a traditional encounter that they have, and they kind of fight with the music that they have, one community and another community, and they come together. And it's made in different places in Bolivia, and Potosí, for example, that's another department in Bolivia, Cochabamba as well, and I think Oruro too. But they have like this tradition, and we call it also choque. Like, you have different groups with different melodies, different traditions even. And they just come to a place and they encounter, and they have to play. They can play for hours until they get tired, and some of them win. And
Wow.
this instrument is kind of coming from there, and it's really hard to play, And we have different sizes of the instrument. I play the tiniest one, but it's also very demanding, and every size of this instrument has its own details, its own way of playing, so it's a lot to take in, actually. So I was listening to it like repeatedly, and it's beautiful because we are still studying the instrument, which is amazing. We're lucky to have the time to study an instrument so deeply, and it's it has been a trip. We have been having with that album.
Yeah, that sounds like a really heavy, but very nourishing type of listening. That's really cool. Zosha, Mariel, thank you so much. I mean, firstly, again, for your record, which is an absolute corker, as we say in Southern England, and also the 4 records that you've picked have been amazing. Really enjoyed it. Huge thanks to you both.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
That has been amazing, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. To everyone listening, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.